Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a lovely day or evening. Today's story features some good karma. Opie found out his wife cheated on him with her affair partner, then divorced him and gave up custody of her kids, all for the sake of being with the affair partner. Now she's begging for mercy after her affair partner kicked her out and she's homeless. In today's second story, Opie heard his fiancée say on the phone that her ex was the best lover she's ever had in her life. Now, let's get into today's stories to find out what happened. My wife and I met back in college. We dated for 5 years before getting married. Our marriage has been good with little ups and downs. We have two girls ages 13 and 15. January last year, I noticed my wife spending more time on her phone than usual. She basically did what every typical cheater does: lied, blame shifted, and gaslight me when I tried to express my concerns. I know I was not perfect and I did some things that I regret very much, but she treated me like a piece of shit all this time during her affair. I tried to improve all the aspects of our relationship that she felt were not good. When Discovery Day came at the beginning of June, she confessed to having an emotional affair and sleeping with him twice. Then she blamed me for her affair. She said that she wanted to reconcile and we tried reconciliation, but she was just not into it. She still contacted him and they were still talking. When I told her how uncomfortable it made me, she said they were just friends and kept deleting texts, even when I told her not to. When I threatened divorce, she would cry, apologize, and beg me not to. When I tried to bring up the affair, she would get mad and somehow I was the one who ended up apologizing. Then after 2 or 3 months, she started disappearing again, saying that she was visiting family because they needed her at the time. I knew she was going to see the affair partner, and when I brought it up, she was very convincing. One weekend, she disappeared and didn't pick up my calls or answer my texts, and when she came back, she told me that her cousin had gotten sick and they had rushed her to the hospital and forgot her phone at her sister's place. And all this time, I was trying to make it work for us. She saw all the efforts I made, but just didn't care. Then by mid-December, she told me that she was moving out, that she had been unhappy in our relationship, and that while she still cared for me, she was in love with her affair partner. She said that she had finally found her soulmate. I remember crying for hours trying to beg her, but her mind was made up. We had to tell the kids. She said that I could have the kids for the weekdays and she could come to visit them on weekends since her affair partner's apartment was small. She filed for divorce a week after. This was the worst moment of my life. I grieved for weeks. I tried to talk to her to see if there was any chance, but all she said was that she was sorry for everything she had put me through, but her mind was made up. No one other than us knew. Both she and my parents knew that we were only separated, but never knew the reason. By the end of January, when her mom called me and insisted I tell the truth, I invited her over together with her dad. I told them everything and literally I broke into tears and cried on my mother-in-law's shoulder. They comforted me and apologized for their daughter's behavior. I later told my parents and then a few close friends. Soon enough, everyone knew about us and I started receiving comforting messages from others talking ill of my ex. Soon afterward, my wife called me crying saying that I turned everyone against her and that she hated me. She said that people were threatening her and her affair partner and that her dad hated her. They had a close relationship and that her sisters didn't want to speak to her and no one would speak with her without insulting her. That was mid-April. By the beginning of June, her relationship with her affair partner had fizzled out due to stress. I remember she came to see the kids and told me that her affair partner kicked her out because he couldn't handle the stress of their relationship. She was living in a hotel room. She didn't look good at all, like someone who was depressed. She asked if she could move back in and I said no. She said that she understood but asked to spend more time with the kids. She said that she wanted to make up for the lost time with the kids and wanted to come in the afternoon and cook for them and spend time with them. I agreed. By this time, she would come to cook my favorite meal, clean the house, and write small notes saying, "I love you," together with flowers. When I came back home from work, she would always try to spend some more time with me. I have to admit I did enjoy spending time with her. Then she started talking about how much she missed me and asked if a divorce was what I really wanted. I always avoided these conversations. Last week, she told me that she had been going to individual counseling and was wondering whether we should try marriage counseling. She has started dressing the way I like and wearing makeup. She has tried to initiate sex, but I've turned her down. She has bought me more goods, and countless times she has brought up marriage counseling. Over the weekend, she cried, begging me not to go through with the divorce, saying she had already put up with a lot and that all she wanted was to get me and her family back. She said she would do whatever I wanted. I know it's like the roles are reversed. All this time I have been numb, although a part of me feels happy now that she has gotten a taste of her own medicine. I still love her, but I don't really know if I should give our relationship another chance. Opie, she's back because you're her only hope right now. How much disrespect is too much? She had an ongoing affair, immediately moved in with him. Only after the relationship failed did she realize she had no one else. Mind you, she has openly told you the relationship ended with the affair partner due to stress, not due to her realizing she made a monumental mistake. Have some respect for yourself and just say no. You deserve better. You can be good co-parents and not be together, but if you get back together, you'll always be looking over your shoulder because you know she can't be trusted. There's just no way that leads to a healthy relationship. You know what would have happened if her mother hadn't contacted you to tell her the truth? Your so-called wife would have gone through with the divorce, and in a couple of weeks, she would have introduced her affair partner to her family as if she met him after the divorce, making her image look innocent. Remember from last January up to mid-December you tried to make it work even after you found out about the affair. You tried to improve yourself for her, but she was still in contact with him. You told her it made you feel uncomfortable, and her reply was, "We are just friends," and deleting text messages. The ultimate disrespect. That was the point where you should have known she wasn't letting him go. Then she disappears on you saying she's visiting her family or that her cousin is in the hospital, and she left her phone at her sister's, knowing she was with her affair partner all that time. December came and she told you she's found her soulmate with her affair partner and is moving in with him. She filed for divorce a week later. Once you told the truth to her family and some close friends, she calls you crying saying everybody hates her, which she deserves all of it, and threatens her and her affair partner. That was this past April. In June, her soulmate, the affair partner, was done with her and kicked her out because she was more trouble than she was worth. Please wake up, Opie. Now, let's get into today's second story. It was quite by accident that I heard this. We had a group of our friends over, and as the night went on, we all kind of busted out into little groups. Some of us were in one room playing Texas Hold'em, and a couple of others were watching a Lord of the Rings marathon. I thought she was watching the movies, but she and one of her close friends were actually sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee and talking. Our group had run out of soda, so I got up to go to the kitchen to get drinks and couple of snacks. As I was rounding the corner, I heard my fiancé talking, and before I completely came into the room, I heard her clearly say Jason is great, but he will never be the lover that Bill was. She then followed it up with, "It's not really fair to Jason though, Bill was just really gifted down there." At first I thought about just walking back into the card game and pretending like we didn't have any extra soda or food, but I decided to kind of make a noise and go in. Her friend caught sight of me rounding the corner, and I could see her make a face at my fiancé, letting her know I was there. Of course, she had no idea I had heard her, and she just stopped talking to her and asked me how I was doing and if I was having fun. I was tempted to say something like I'm having as much fun as someone who is not gifted down there can, but I didn't. I just said yes and proceeded to get my stuff and go back and finish the night. I just acted like nothing was wrong the rest of the night and went to bed. Needless to say, it messed me up. I mean, it messed me up badly. I've never been jealous or what you would call insecure about myself until that moment. I couldn't sleep that night, and I went through a myriad of emotions while laying there. At first, I was angry, then I was humiliated, then I was depressed, then I was angry again. Look, I realized that the male ego seems stupid to women, and even to guys who are totally self-assured. I would have agreed with most of this prior to that night, but once it has been damaged, it's a bitch. I tried to hide any form of emotion about it so that I would never let her know I knew, but as the days went on, I just kept getting worse and worse. I was avoiding her at all costs, and while she was suspicious, she didn't really say anything. That is until she attempted to be intimate with me a few days later, and I flat out rejected her. It wasn't a conscious decision on my part, by the way. I had made the decision on my own to just try and get over it and move on, but in that moment, instead of being sexually aroused, I felt deeply inadequate and ashamed. Nothing was happening no matter how much either of us tried. She asked me what was wrong, and I just told her I must have been stressed from work, but she would not believe that or let it go. So much to my humiliation, there I lay naked in bed, unable to get an erection. I came clean and told her what I heard. Well, that did not go over well at all. At first, she tried to tell me I did not hear her correctly, but I just repeated to her verbatim what she had told her. Well, once she couldn't deny it, she then tried to apologize, and to her credit, she tried to listen to my feelings on the matter, which once again I am sure was more of a big turnoff for her because I was a wreck emotionally. She tried to tell me how much of a better person I was and how I satisfied her, and she wanted nobody else, but all I could hear was the Charlie Brown teacher noise. It's been almost a month, and I have zero desire to be with her sexually, none. She is now getting frustrated about this as well, but no matter what I have tried, I just cannot get past this. It's not like she said we were both good lovers or anything like that. She clearly said he was far superior, and my guess is that being gifted down there, it means he was significantly larger than me as well. Well, I know I can do all kinds of things with my hands, tongue, and whatever else, but no matter what I do, I can't grow in size. Obviously, she refuses to talk about that with me, saying that anything she could say would only make things worse, because even if she said something positive about me, I wouldn't believe her. She's most likely right. Some backstory here. He dumped her. It was not a mutual breakup. He flat out dumped her and broke her heart. I know this because early on in our relationship, she told me this. She said she wasn't ready to be serious about anybody because her previous ex left her and emotionally broke her. So this is not a case of me even being able to say, well, she's with me because she wants to be. If he hadn't dumped her, she would never have left him. Now I have no idea if after all of these years she would leave me for him if he came back, but I don't think she would. I just don't know what to do here. I can feel myself checking out of the relationship. I know this is petty as crap, but hearing the person you love tell someone else they preferred having sex with someone else was just devastating to me. Her telling me all of my other good qualities has only made it worse, because she is saying things that I think appeal to her and maybe other women, but being told I am a good provider and will make a great husband makes me feel like crap. Like, what would happen if I lost my good-paying job, or better yet, what if I were to get injured and couldn't make anything more than state assistance? Would she be there to support and help me? Basically, what I feel like right now is a really good friend who is just allowed to have sex with her. I know in my head that this is not correct, but in my heart, that is what I feel. I'm sorry for the length here, and I don't even know what I'm asking here. I am totally lost, and if this continues, I just think I'm going to break off our engagement. Update. It all came to a head last night. She just came out and asked me if I did not love her anymore, and all that I could tell her was that a very large part of me still did, but that what she said had really made it so that another part of me just didn't anymore. This started a larger conversation that I won't bore you with, but ultimately it came down to me saying that if I had heard that he was just better at something or more attentive to something or was able to do something that I couldn't, I would have felt like I could have worked on it. I would have listened to anything she wanted to work on, any technique or anything else that she would have shared with me, but to know that I was never going to measure up simply because of a physical issue is not something I thought I could get over anytime soon, if I ever could for that matter. I was even honest and said that if it was just a one-night stand she had or some random guy who was that huge, I might have been able to get past that, but knowing that it was a guy who she was still madly in love with when I met her and only after time did she start to come around, then it was just more than I could handle. She kept trying to tell me how much better I was at everything else and that I should not throw away a lifetime over one aspect. I told her that one aspect sadly was just too high for me, that not all things are equal, and that honestly it was a mental failing on my part, but whether it was genetics or a learned trait or whatever, that yes, I needed to be my spouse's best, and she had already made it clear that I could never be. I tried my best to be gentle. I tried to take all the blame by stating that I knew that my attitude was probably not healthy, but it was who I am. Now for the final update, it is over. I went to counseling with her on 3 different occasions, and honestly, I tried to have an open mind about it, but at the end of the day, the obstacle was just too much to overcome. I even gave her an opportunity to walk back on her statement or mend it, or well, do whatever she wanted to do with it, but instead she doubled down in a way. I think by that time she was very frustrated as well. Neither of us is really happy about this. It has been an absolute nightmare for me trying to avoid telling people and family why we are no longer together. Of course, I tried the old "it's none of your business" to some of them, but that failed spectacularly, and since I refused to tell, they decided she cheated on me and started spreading that around. I've had to do a lot of damage control over that. I've decided to continue with therapy on a personal level because honestly, this entire thing has really messed with my head, and I have no self-esteem left at all. I've only seen her once since we separated, and it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. She is now justifiably so in the angry stage. She is furious with me and has called me everything that you can imagine, and then even made up some words. Oh, Pete, her being mad at you should really set your mind at ease that breaking up is the right thing for you to do. She's not the person you want to be with long term, and though it sucks now, the only anger she should be feeling is towards herself and for her actions. Now she will have to live with the consequences of her actions for the rest of her life. It would suck worse to have heard this a couple of years down the road after the wedding, when it then became a legal matter on top of everything else. You absolutely dodged a bullet, my friend. I wish you the best of luck going forward. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's stories. If there's a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Hey folks, welcome back to my channel, Relationship Haven. Today's story is about redemption. Opie's wife cheated on him with her boss, then left him. Years later, his wife is still suffering the consequences from her actions while Opie is living his best life. Let's get into the story. A story of redemption after a failed reconciliation. Hello, everyone. I've been lurking around for a few weeks and have engaged with enough posts to feel that it is time for a formal introduction. My story happened close to 30 years ago. I'm currently 61. This happened in my late 20s, early 30s. Back then, I married my college sweetheart. What always attracted me to her was how I perceived her as a strong and independent woman. The icing on the cake was that she also was what you could call a Caribbean beauty. We married, and 4 days later, we relocated to the East Coast of the USA to begin new jobs. me as an engineer and she as a chemist. I would say that the first 4 years of our marriage were, if not idyllic, at least happier than the average marriage. Since we had no family and friends close, we spent a lot of time with each other and we had some great times together. Our troubles started when we decided to purchase a townhouse, and I thought that the next logical step in our relationship was to start a family. To my surprise, when I proposed this idea, it threw our relationship into a deep downward spiral. After many arguments, my ex confessed that it was not that she did not want to have children, but that she did not want to have children with me. Ouch. She also said that having a child with me would mean tying herself completely to me, and she did not know if she wanted to spend the rest of her life with me. After these conversations, things did not improve until one day she came and told me that she was not attracted to me anymore. I asked her if there was someone else she was attracted to, and she said yes, that she felt a great attraction for her boss. You see, unknown to me, she and her boss developed an infatuation with each other. In her job, she had to travel about 50% of the time, and he would accompany her on these trips. By the time she confessed her feelings for him, they had already developed a platonic relationship which soon turned physical on one of these trips. When returning from this trip, I could see that something had changed. She was very contrite and began to talk about selling our home and moving to a smaller town in which we could just have a little house with a little garden and we would begin new and more quiet lives. I must admit, I was like, what the F are you talking about? You have been talking about not loving me, not wanting to have children with me, and now wanting to relocate with me? She then began to tell me this long story about how her mom, who was divorced and remarried, when she was having her own marriage problems with her first husband, had taken a vacation to Mexico and had a one-week tryst with a local man. This all should have raised all sorts of alarms in my mind, as it was an almost admission that she had cheated with her boss on this most recent trip. But I was a lot younger and a lot denser in the head, so I missed the obvious of the situation. After this revelation, things precipitated rapidly. She began working late, taking weekends by herself in the mountains, where later I learned her boss had a cabin, and even taking a one-week vacation by herself in order to clear her mind. Keep in mind, these were the times of no cellular phones, so there was no way I could have gotten a hold of her. I still remember how crazy I was going without any communication with my wife for a whole week, without knowing where she was. All sorts of scenarios were floating in my head, except the most obvious. She's with her lover on a one-week fun trip. Throughout all this time, I continued to support her and paid for individual counseling, drove her to her appointments, and even waited for her in the car. I think the individual counseling convinced her that she was being very unfair to me because she intimated that the idea of divorce came from him and not her. I was still hanging to the hope that with the right amount of individual counseling, I was going to be able to help her sort her mind and become the wife she had been right after our wedding. It was clear she was in deep turmoil, in which sometimes she would say she loved me, and sometimes she could not stand to be in my presence. With time, I started noticing that she would try to get into arguments with me by telling me different reasons why she was not happy. She would keep on fishing for a reason which would get me upset. Once she hit on one, she would escalate the attacks until I just would leave the house, searching for peace, and she could get on the phone and call her lover based on phone records. The day she asked me for a divorce, my life crumbled. I knew we were having our troubles, but never in my wildest dreams would I have thought of divorce. Here you must understand that I come from a very Catholic culture, Hispanic, and the idea of divorce was anathema to me. Around this time, I had to take a trip to a different state for a 2-week training. When I came back, she was gone, along with one half of our furniture and one half of our savings. I had no idea where she had gone. Back then, I had no one to lean on to. There was no interest, no Reddits, no online resources or communities. I felt alone, abandoned, and fell into a deep crevice of depression. I had basically let myself go for the previous 18 months while dealing with all the drama and stress. I had gained a lot of weight and really didn't care about my health or my appearance. I firmly believe that we look the way we feel, and back then, I looked like crap. My ex had left me with no return address and no way to contact her. The original no contact, while making sure to tell all of our friends that this was all my fault. So I also lost a few close friends I had. I was completely alone. Luckily, I was able to drag myself to work every day and made enough to keep the lenders away. After almost a year of feeling like crap, one morning, I awoke and noticed how the shadows slowly moved on the empty walls of the empty rooms of my home, and it dawned on me. If I did not pull myself out of the hellhole of despair I was living in, soon I would become another shadow in the wall of an empty room. To give you an idea of how I felt back then, 5 years ago, I had open heart surgery. They cut my chest open, split my sternum, and spread my ribs so that the surgeons could have access to my internal organs. After reconfiguring my organs, they wired my chest and sewed me up. I still have 11 titanium wires holding my chest. It took me 18 months to return to a semi-normal way of living, and you know something? I would gladly have another open heart surgery than reliving the experience of spousal betrayal and an abandonment. It was brutal. It was by the grace of God that I pulled myself out of that well of despair and began to rebuild my life. I decided to completely remake myself. I had a good job and a roof over my head. I began to exercise and lost 50 pounds, got a new wardrobe, got rid of my glasses, got eye contacts, began to run, and eventually trained for a marathon. I began to rock climb and play league volleyball. I began to live a life I could be proud of. I'm not the most good-looking guy, but I began to irradiate an aura of confidence that people noticed and women found attractive. Soon, I began to date and realized that my wife's betrayal was the best thing that happened to me because it allowed me to discover the real me. After a couple of years of living this life, I began to look for another life companion, which I found in a friend from work. We had been coworkers before my troubles began, and she had witnessed my decline and how I had slowly remade myself. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in my life. The guards in my building, whom I was buddy with, could not believe it when I told them that I was dating what they knew as the babe of the building. Eventually, we fell in love and married. She quit her job and decided to stay at home to focus on raising our 4 kids. This meant being a one-income family on the very expensive East Coast of the USA. It also meant that we could not live a life of luxury, but my wife turned out to be a great home manager and a better mom. This woman ran triathlons and learned great auto maintenance, woodworking, and general carpentry while managing a family of 6. There is no house project she is not willing to attack, and we are currently building a camper van so that we can drive across the USA when I retire this December. This winter, we will be welcoming our first grandchild. I can honestly say my wife made me discover the true meaning of a strong and independent woman. My life has been so much enriched because of her. So you see, no one knows what the future would bring. All we have to do is get our act together and trust that there are good people also seeking and willing to share their lives with us. Betrayal should not define us, especially if no reconciliation is possible, and even if reconciliation doesn't work, this doesn't mean it is the end of our roads. You might be wondering what happened to the ex. Well, a few years after she left me, I heard that within months of her abandonment, her boss divorced his wife and they moved together and eventually got married. About 15 years ago, she called me right out of the blue. I'm still wondering how she got my number to let me know a mutual friend had passed away. We had a short but cordial conversation. At one point, I asked her how she was doing, and she said that she was living with the consequence of youthful mistakes, to which I answered, "That's all in the past. I don't even think about it," and I hung up. I can honestly say that in my heart, I have gratitude for her because her decisions brought me and my wife together. One last thing, another consequence of my failed marriage and reconciliation is that for the last 15 years, I've led a ministry at my parish. I'm a Catholic permanent deacon, with a divorced and separated. I have worked with literally dozens of people that were struggling with their divorces to help them find some peace and look forward to their future with confidence. All thanks to my ex-wife's reluctance to reconcile with me. Edit. I have received a few questions which I will answer as an epilogue to my story. Did she ever apologize? She never even said goodbye. It was as if the years we spent together, we met in college and were best friends for a number of years before we started dating, meant nothing to her, neither she apologized. Did you ever talk to her? We had bought a townhouse together and she was paying part of the mortgage. In order to communicate, she developed this very bizarre process of phone calls between friends so that I could get a hold of her, and then she would call me if she thought communication was necessary. Since I did not change my number, she could call me at any time. We only talked a handful of times. Did you ever see her again? Between her abandonment and our final divorce, I saw her 3 times. The last one, the day our divorce became final. This was a couple of years after she abandoned me. She looked like crap, no makeup, very hippy-dippy clothes. I, on the other hand, had lost 50 pounds and was hitting the weights pretty hard back then. In addition, because of how much weight I had lost, all my clothes were tailored, cheaper than buying new. So that day I looked sharp, with the suit and tie I was wearing. The last look she gave me when the judge was asking me if I had any objections with the divorce agreement is forever burned in my mind. Pure atred. I guess her narcissistic brain could not comprehend how much I had thrived without her negative influence in my life. Wow, up. I am absolutely amazed at the progress you've made. Sometimes in life, it takes someone having to hit rock bottom to truly be able to take the steps to transform their life. And that is what has happened to you. The time period you went through was absolute hell. But by doing so, you were able to reach the end of the tunnel. This story is an inspiration to many who are in or have been in a similar situation to Opie. Remember that if you continue to persevere and work through what happened, you will ultimately find the light. Now you are living your best life while your wife's life is in shambles. What an inspiring story to read. Let's see what the comments had to say about the situation. Ekatrep said you're an inspiration to many Opie. I am just turned 60 and do not have quite as happy an ending. But I did pull myself out of that abyss, and I'm living a happy, fulfilled, single life. As I'm sure you found through your struggle, you honestly have to be able to be happy with and by yourself before you can find happiness with a partner. Too many people today look to the partner to make them happy. God bless you and your family and your ministry. Be well. Opie responded by saying, after betrayal, we will never be 100%. That doesn't make us deficient. It makes us human. I have learned more about myself because of the pain I have endured than by any other way. Keep working on yourself, develop confidence and positivity, and you will see how people's reception of yourself begins to change. There is something attractive about someone who survives hell and can still smile. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well as comment on what your thoughts are about today's story. I hope you have a great rest of your day or evening. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship when I, 34 male, met my wife, 35 female. It hadn't been a traumatic breakup. The two of us were just growing apart and wanted different things out of life, so we decided it was better to break up. A few months after that breakup, I'd bumped into a woman who introduced herself as Katie. We just started talking in a coffee shop and hit it off. When we exchanged numbers, I did warn her that I had just gotten out of a serious relationship, which meant I wasn't ready for anything serious or anything at all. She waited until I was ready, which was pretty amazing for me. I thought that a woman willing to wait for me must have interested me, right? It ended up not being the case, but at the time it truly did seem like I found someone good for me. We took it slow, and within a year and a half, the two of us were moving in together. After another 6 months, I proposed and we were planning a wedding. The wedding went off without a hitch. The two of us were financially stable at the time of our wedding. I had a decent job, and so did my wife. While we might not have been as rich as the 1%, the two of us could be considered middle class at the very least. Our relationship was also good. We had our ups and downs, but the two of us truly did seem to be creating a great life together. For the first 3 years, everything seemed great until my wife started working on a particular project at work that was difficult, or this was what I thought of at the time. She was working long hours and just spending a lot of time out of the house. I missed her, but I understood that she was busy at work. When I had an important project at work, she supported me. I kept asking when she would be finished, but my wife kept extending the deadline. This has been going on for nearly 6 months now. It made no sense why she would still be spending all these late nights at work. It got to the point where I couldn't deny that something wasn't right there, so I went on to her laptop that she had brought home from work. Her home laptop didn't have anything. I already checked. This meant the evidence had to be there. I didn't know what evidence I was looking for, but I knew there had to be something on her laptop that would explain to me what was going on. On her laptop, I found several emails from an email account I didn't even know she had. On this email were dozens of emails that were shared between this unknown man. They were all of a romantic or sexual nature, which only confirmed the truth that I was afraid to admit to myself. She was cheating on me. When she came back home from picking up dinner for us, I had the laptop out in the open with the emails right there so she could see that I knew everything. My wife didn't say anything at first. She looked like she was in shock, so I took the chance to ask her who was the guy she was cheating with. My wife screamed, saying I had no right to go into her work laptop because that contained confidential information. I almost wanted to laugh because she had been the one to use her work laptop to talk with this guy, so I asked again. He was a former client of the office that she had continued speaking to even after the contract ended. One thing led to another, and they started sleeping together. I asked if she had feelings for him. She said yes. My wife said she was going to eventually tell me that she wanted a divorce so she could move on and be with this man. Once I did a little digging, I discovered this man was very rich. When I say rich, I mean filthy, stinking rich. She always loved the finer things in life, but seemed like she wanted to work towards it. I couldn't understand the shift in her personality. Maybe it had always been there, and I was so blinded by my love for her that I just wasn't able to see it. Whatever the reason, I knew this marriage was over. My wife fought it for a bit, but I think she was only doing this because she felt like it was what she had to do. The divorce seemed to take a long time to come to fruition, but in reality, it was just a matter of months. She went one way and I went another. A divorce never was on my radar. Yet here I was newly divorced and alone. My ex-wife already had someone in mind. She posted on social media that she was with a new man and they were engaged to be married. The truth of it was that her so-called fiancé was already married. He told her he was a widow, but his wife wasn't dead. Rather, she was just in another country taking care of an ailing family member. When she returned, everything hit the fan, so to speak. My ex-wife's engagement was called off, but this was a moot point given that her AP was already married. They couldn't get married anyway. After that, her social media posts seemed to become quite erratic. She was posting about how she had lost her soulmate, but what I think she was upset losing was her wealthy AP. It was all about the money. This guy was going to help her get to that lifestyle much faster. Meanwhile, after my divorce, I reconnected with the girl from the past whom I had originally cut things off with just before meeting Katie. The two of us were friends for a while before we realized that we were finally in a place where we could give this a second try. She knew about my divorce and was sympathetic. When word got back to my ex that I was back with this particular woman, she went ballistic and started blasting me all over social media. She spent so much time blasting me and her AP over all her social media that her job started to become in jeopardy, from what I heard. My wife was put on probation at her place of work. They were a public company, so things you could post could be used against them in some way. I just chose to shut down my social media for the time being because reading her posts was doing nothing but causing stress for me. As far as I know, she has been moved to another department and isn't making as much money as she once was. This is all on my ex. If she had just been happy for what she had, then all of that could have been prevented. My current girlfriend and I are talking about marriage, but are trying to take it very slow right now. The last thing I want to do is run into anything without being completely sure. Don't want to make the same mistake twice. Opie, it's almost poetic to think that you ended up in a relationship with the girlfriend you were with all those years ago. It's a shame that you had to go through your ex cheating on you followed by a divorce to get back to her. No one should have to go through that. Your ex truly is a piece of work. She's lucky that she didn't lose her job completely for having a relationship with a former client and using her work computer, no less. In my opinion, they should have fired her the second they found out about it. However, again, this is just my opinion. It's almost laughable that her relationship with the AP turned out the way she did. What did she expect from someone willing to sleep with a woman? I imagine most people with any sense aren't going to be surprised he was lying the entire time, just like your ex was. Good on you for moving on and taking it slow with your new girlfriend. It seems like the two of you have something special. Of course, things could change, but this is the point of taking it slow. To make sure no mistakes are made as you mentioned at the end of your post. Now for our next story. I, 49 male, met my wife, 49 female, when we were in our mid-20s. We were friends for a while before we decided to date. The two of us dated for around a year, which isn't that long in the grand scheme of things, but at the time it seemed like we had been dating long enough. She mentioned us getting married, and I said I wanted to wait a little longer. Within a few months, I finally was ready to propose to my then girlfriend. She accepted, and the two of us started planning a wedding. It was around this point I should recognize the red flags, but I didn't. Why? Well, I was in love. See, my fiancé wanted a huge wedding. While I understand it was a special experience, I didn't see the point of spending a couple grand on what was essentially one day. I ended up convincing her to have a small intimate ceremony. She seemed all right with it at the time, but I think as the months and years went by, she almost started to resent me for talking her into that. The thing is, we couldn't have afforded such a wedding at the time. I suggested that one day we could have the wedding of her dreams one day if we decided to renew her vows. This seemed to please her, but again I felt like this resentment was always there, just lingering beneath the surface. Was I the most romantic guy in the world? No, but I tried hard to keep the romance alive by doing little things for her over the years, and it wasn't like my wife didn't know this when we got married. We also didn't have kids, so there wasn't that pressure hanging over us. The years passed, and by the time we were in our 40s, we had been married for almost 2 decades. Things had gotten stale for the past year or so, which led me to plan a romantic night out. I even asked my sister for help because, like I said, I wasn't very romantic. It ended up not going anywhere. My wife never came home that night, and when she did, she said that she had stayed at a friend's house. They had been drinking, so she figured it was safer for her to just spend the night there. I saw no reason to not believe her, so I took her at her word. The next night I tried again, and we had a pleasant dinner. When I tried to initiate intimacy, she brushed me off saying she was too tired. Again, I didn't think too much of it. We both worked a lot, which was why we were finally able to afford the lifestyle we were currently living. This trend continued, and it got to the point where I had to ask myself if I was going to continue to believe her stupid lies, which were lies. I reached out to her friends to see if she was there, but they covered for her. I shouldn't have been surprised. The only way I could think was to directly confront her about her lies and ask her if she was cheating. To my surprise, she admitted everything the night I confronted her. I think I was in shock that she just straight up told me that she was cheating. Honestly, I don't know what I was expecting. I think I thought she might try to deny it and tell me that I was wrong, but she didn't do any of that, so I asked who it was and how long it had been going on. He was a family member of one of friends she met one day. It was an instant attraction, and he was so romantic. There it was, the one thing that I could never manage to do. I did try, but my wife didn't think that I was trying hard enough. This guy was everything I wasn't, and more, she claimed. Our marriage ended that night, and what began was the divorce process. It wasn't a bitter divorce. We agreed to split everything down the middle. The house would be sold, and we each take half. This seemed like the best option for us to get away from each other quickly. Once everything was final, I bought a condo with the money we split from the joint account. I still had a decent amount left over that I was going to keep for a nest egg. Eventually, the house sold, and I put that money away as well. You never knew when you were going to need it. My ex ended up doing the exact opposite. She took her money and bought an even bigger house than the one we lived in with each other. Then I heard that she was planning a wedding. A very huge wedding, I might add. It was the wedding she had always wanted. I was having flashbacks to the wedding we had all those years ago. My ex had resented me for all these years because we never had the wedding she truly wanted. As embarrassing as it is to admit, I did look at pictures on Facebook afterwards, and my God, it was a huge affair. Everything looked so expensive. I can just imagine how much money she spent on the whole thing, including the dress. At that point, I knew I had to take a step back and stop obsessing over this woman who was my ex. I focused on spending time with my friends and family, which helped. I assumed my ex was spending time with her AP. Turns out, though, not everything was great. I learned that a year after they got married, they were in debt. My ex spent the divorce settlement on the expensive house and expensive wedding, making it so she had nothing left. Her job did bring in a decent amount of income. My ex was the only one making good money in that household because the AP was a bum. She dared to out to me to see if I could lend her some money. My ex played on our past relationship and the memories we made over 2 decades, but I wasn't buying it. I told her that it wasn't my problem that she spent all of her divorce settlement on pointless crap. I hung up on her and proceeded to receive at least 3 more calls from her that night, along with 3 very nasty voicemails. After I listened to them, I just laughed and played them to my friends to show how far she had fallen. They all found them as funny as I did. My ex truly had no shame, or was just that desperate. I don't know if she ever truly believed that I would give her the money or not. Even if she had reached out to me a few months prior, I still wouldn't have given it to her. At no point was I ever that desperate. I blocked her number that night because I didn't want to hear another word from her. We were done. She cheated and wanted to go be with her AP, who was the new love of her life. If she had planned better, then my ex would have money, just like I still did. Most of my family and friends were happy to see her go. I wonder if they had ever liked her, or just tried to get along with her for my sake. It didn't matter anymore, though, because my ex was a part of my past, and that was where she was going to stay. Opie, you made the right decision all those years ago not to have an expensive wedding. It's only one day out of your entire life. It's not to say that you can't make it special, but rent a wedding dress. Don't get a hugely expensive venue either. Make it a nice and small, intimate affair. The one thing I'll give your ex is that she did own up to it right away. It doesn't change the fact that she never should have cheated on you in the first place, but at least she didn't continue to lie, even when the evidence was right there. It's quite ironic that your ex was finally able to plan the wedding of her dreams, but it ended up being what was truly her downfall. She probably realizes now that it was a bad choice to waste all that money not only on a huge house she probably didn't need, but a huge wedding. To think she reached out to you for money means she must have been desperate. Good on you for shutting it down and leaving her to deal with the consequences. She made her bed of debt, and now she is going to have to lie in it with her bum of a husband. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. When you marry your spouse, you have to recite vows such as in sickness and health, for better or worse, and most importantly, till death do you part. I, male 45, took those vows seriously when I married my first wife, 45, 15 years ago. The two of us married after dating for about 4 years and living together for 2. It seemed like we were a great fit for one another. Similar goals, interests, values, and everything like that. It was around 3 years in when I started noticing little things. She wasn't distant or anything and still accepted my touch, but she was sneaky. My ex never wanted me to see her phone, not that I had a reason to at the time, but making it so obvious drew attention to it. This probably ended up being her downfall. The thing that made me realize something was going on was when her phone rang while we were watching a movie one night. She bolted to the bathroom and started talking in hushed voices. I confronted her when she came back because that was just too strange for me not to bring up. Again, more denial that nothing was going on. It was her friend who really needed to talk to her. I remember hearing a male voice before she rushed off to the bathroom, so I confronted her about that fact. It's a guy friend who was her excuse. As far as I knew, my wife didn't have any male friends. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but the fact that she didn't say anything was concerning. So I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed her phone from her when she was texting on it constantly one day. She shouted at me, but I got the evidence I needed. I saw texts back and forth with this guy named John. They were of a romantic and sexual nature, which just confirmed for me that my wife had been cheating on me. I asked how long this had been going on. She said a few months. It wasn't something she was looking for, but it just happened. The thought never crossed my mind that she would ever step outside our marriage. It sounded silly, but I never saw it coming. We seemed happy, and she seemed genuinely happy to me. Yet, here she was telling me she had cheated on me with some guy she met at a coffee shop of all places. He was the barista and started flirting with her. One thing led to another, and a month later, they started an affair. Cheating was a deal breaker for me, so I told my wife our marriage was over. She cried and seemed genuinely distraught by the thought that our marriage was going to be over. This lasted for a few days, until I told her I had finally gone to the lawyer to start the divorce process. After I told my wife, she told me that she never loved me anyway, and her new boyfriend would make her happier than I ever would. The sudden change in her attitude was shocking. I knew she was just doing this to hurt me, so I tried to brush it off. In a little under a week, my wife moved out and stayed with her family. I almost wanted to ask why she hadn't moved in with her new boyfriend, but I wanted to make a clean break from her. After the papers were signed, I felt relieved. However, there was also devastation. I hated the fact that my first marriage had ended the way it did. We were supposed to spend the rest of our lives together. At the time, I was close to turning 35 and facing the end of my marriage. My ex seemed so happy once the divorce was final. She'd be posting these pictures on Facebook of her new boyfriend. I had to eventually delete my Facebook because it wasn't a good idea for me to constantly be obsessing over what she was doing. I then started working on myself. Working out, hobbies, friends, and everything I could do to keep my mind off my ex. The divorce was a necessity, but it didn't mean that I wasn't hurt that this ended up being the outcome. It was entirely my ex-wife's fault. All she had to do was stick to her vows. How hard was that? After about a year, I was starting to reach a new level of happiness. I wasn't sure what my ex-wife was up to and didn't care. My sister cared because she took it upon herself to tell me what happened to my wife. They had mutual friends, so it was easy to find out what was going on with my ex. The AP ended up taking her for all she was worth. She paid his bills, gave him money for a business, and the kicker was he had been cheating on her the entire time. I didn't feel any pity for my ex because now she knew how it felt. How she thought a cheater was going to be faithful to her was beyond me. She was in a lot of debt now thanks to giving the AP so much money. During our marriage, we both had good jobs and made decent money. We had long since paid off any debt we had, so it was a shock to learn that she had ended up in such a bad financial spot. This woman my sister was describing to me didn't sound like my ex at all. It sounded like an entirely different woman. She was so desperate that she had even gone around asking others for money, including my sister. I was surprised she didn't reach out to me, but I had her blocked on all my devices. We didn't share any children, so there was no reason for us to remain in contact with one another. Once I met my second wife, all thoughts of my ex flew out of my mind. We met at work actually, and while it's never a good idea to get involved with a coworker, I couldn't help myself. The same applied to her. It was about a year and a half after we met and started dating that I proposed. It was quite fast, but I felt like it was right. When my wedding was announced, my ex did reach out to me to tell me congratulations. I just responded with a smiley emoji, because how else can you respond to that? I didn't have any obligation to speak with her, but I still wanted to say something to her, just to get it off my mind and never have to think about it again for as long as I lived. Now I'm 45, and I've been married to my second wife for years. Things couldn't be better between the both of us. The last I heard, my first wife was still alone and hopping from relationship to relationship. The way things are looking for my ex is not good. She is going to end up being alone when she could have had a long-lasting relationship. I guess I should thank her because if she hadn't cheated on me, I never would have met my second wife who is amazing. Opie, it's good to hear that you were able to find happiness with your second wife after the heartache you experienced with your first wife. The last thing you said is especially poignant because she probably did you a favor when you think about it. Still, I hate that you had to hurt to find your way to true happiness. She is now reaping what she sowed by cheating on you all those years ago. People always go about a sudden problem in their marriage the wrong way. Instead of talking to the partner, they seek someone outside the relationship, which makes no sense. It was no surprise to hear that the man she cheated on you with ended up cheating on her. Once a cheater, always a cheater, as the popular saying goes. If she ends up spending the rest of her life alone, then that is on her. You were big enough to respond to her congratulations message, even if it wasn't necessary at all. This story is another example of always pushing forward and never giving up on love. You took a chance even though you were terrified because you felt like it would be good for you. It truly is a good mindset to have after such a traumatic event as a divorce. Now, let's get into our second story. My wife and I met on a blind date that was set up by friends. I was a little hesitant to go through with this blind date because I never had much luck with them, but I had been in a bit of a dry spell. It was either go on this date or continue to remain lonely. I got on the date, and it ended up being amazing. My wife or girlfriend at the time was very friendly and charming. We had a decent amount in common where making conversation wasn't a struggle. The two of us dated for nearly 2 years. From there, we moved in together and got married in a small wedding ceremony surrounded by family and friends. We had lived together before marriage, which I always insisted on doing. In my mind, it gave people a chance to get to know each other better and see if they were a match before taking that giant step into marriage. Marrying my wife seemed like the best decision at the time. The two of us moved into a better apartment, continued to succeed in our jobs, and even got a pet dog. She was the one who wanted the dog, yet I ended up being the one who took care of it most of the time. Don't get me wrong, I loved the dog and enjoyed taking care of her. I'd always loved animals, but my wife was the one who wanted this specific breed that could be a bit difficult to handle. She promised me up and down that she would care for the dog a little more than half the time. However, I was doing over 90% of the work when it came to our pet. This should have been my first red flag that she was so willing to brush off a responsibility. I just did my best to handle it because I was still madly in love with my wife. When she got a promotion at work, things started to change, but not for the better. I understood she had a lot of responsibilities now because she was supervising 3 people. It just seemed like there was something more to it. Anytime I asked her what was going on, she just said she was super stressed at work and that she was sorry for treating me this way. It was just a whole lot of stress. I wanted to believe it, so I forced myself to believe it. Ignorance is bliss, as they say, and I remained in ignorance for nearly a year after my wife's change in behavior. One day, I decided to surprise her at work. I had gotten off early, so I thought it would be a nice romantic little thing for us to do. I got to the office and was told that my wife had stepped out to go to lunch. It was my fault for not checking with her, so I went back to my car. When I was about to pull out of the parking spot, I saw my wife entering the office building with a younger man who I think was one of her subordinates. The reason I did a double take is how she was acting with him. She was very touchy, giggly, and not acting like a supervisor would with someone they were supervising. I watched them go inside the building, but as much as I tried to brush it off, I couldn't because I kept picturing how happy she looked. My wife never looked at me like that anymore. It pained me to say this, but it was the truth. I wanted to ask her what was going on, except I doubted she would tell me the truth. So, I decided to check her phone when she was in the shower. The phone is always the place where you'll find what you need. Her texts were full of evidence of an affair with her subordinate. I sent copies of all the texts to myself in a surge of impulsivity. I wanted a chance to be able to use them. Once she got out of the shower, I told her I knew of the affair and to not BS me about everything because I knew the truth. She seemed shocked that I would take the step of going into her phone and violating her trust, which was ridiculous. She was the one to cheat on me in the first place. She looked like she wanted to hit me, but just stormed off back into the bathroom. I was glad that we only had another month left on this lease, because our marriage was over. For a few days after that, I was in shock about the end of my marriage, and once the shock wore off, the grief set in. My wife had left to go stay with her parents. They were supporting her, but this was no surprise. To them, she was their little girl who could do no wrong. I had finally sought out a lawyer and planned to move into another unit in the complex that was smaller than the one I shared with my wife. She seemed to be facing no consequences. Her family and friends were on her side with her job still going well. It was then I had enough and decided to make the affair known to my wife's workplace. I had evidence to back it up, so it wasn't like I couldn't prove it. The fallout was quick. My wife was forced to resign, and the subordinate was moved to another department. When I learned she left her job, she reached out to me and lashed out, saying how she knew this was my fault. I didn't deny it and told her I took screenshots of her text messages that day and was sitting on them for weeks now. She screamed and cried, saying she was going to have her father hire a lawyer to go after me, but it was all bluster. My soon-to-be ex was the one who had done wrong by having a relationship with someone below her. It went against the rules set forth by her place of work. It was a relief when the divorce was final and we were no longer legally married. I spent a lot of the situation in a state of shock and then devastation. Most of the time I was wavering between the two. The divorce being final was a chance for me to be able to heal, which I desperately needed. For a while, my ex-wife did try to harass me, but eventually it stopped. I don't know why she did that, and frankly, I didn't care. It meant that my ex was now finally out of my hair. It was the best part of it. The last I heard about my ex is that she had gotten another job, but it's much lower paying than her other one. It had been hard for her to find one because of how suddenly she left her other job. This was completely of her own doing, so she had no one to blame but herself. I still don't know where it all went wrong or why she cheated in the first place. The best I can figure is she's just a terrible person who enjoyed the rush of cheating on me with someone at work. His being younger probably was a boost to her ego too. My ex certainly would have gone far in that job too. I've since received another promotion with another on the horizon. I also got the dog in the divorce because I was the one to take care of her anyway. There was no way she was going to take her. Honestly, I can say I don't care what happens to my ex or where she ends up in 5 years. I'm on the path to happiness, and she seems to be on a path to permanent misery. Do I hope that she looks back and regrets what she did? Sort of, but I hope one day I won't care about that either. Opie. It was such a boss move to take screenshots of her text messages and then send them to the higher-ups at your wife's job. She should have thought about the consequences before she started sleeping with a subordinate. Anyone will tell you that's a bad idea, and if it does get found out, it can result in the loss of a job. Just keep that woman on the back burner of your mind. She isn't worth any more of your thoughts, tears, or energy. It's a shame her family backed their daughter and refused to force her to take responsibility for her actions, but this just proves the whole family is trash. Continue to focus on your job, dog, and whatever else makes you happy. This will help you truly be able to move on from her once and for all. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.